My fiancée disappeared a week before the wedding, and the next day, our friends saw her kissing a man outside a strip club. So, I've been with Sarah for 5 years now. Like any couple, we've had our share of ups and downs, but overall, things were good, stable. Even 3 years ago, we got engaged, and the wedding was set for just 6 weeks away. We had the venue booked, the cake picked out, and the invitations sent. All the usual details were pretty much sorted. It felt like the perfect next step for us. Sarah seemed just as excited as I was. She even helped me pick out my tux and spent weeks obsessing over her dress. She kept saying how she couldn't wait for our big day to finally happen. But then, out of nowhere, she dropped something on me that I never saw coming. One night after dinner, she casually mentioned that she was going on a last-minute trip to Europe with some friends from college. It was a random group, none of whom I really liked or trusted, but whatever, right? People go on pre-wedding trips all the time. At first, I didn't think much of it. That was until she followed it up with, "I think we need a break." I just sat there, staring at her, trying to wrap my head around what she just said. We had been talking about seating charts, wedding songs, and even our honeymoon just the night before. A break? Why? She was supposed to leave in 2 days, and now she was asking for space? My mind was spinning. I asked her, "What's going on? Why now?" And Sarah gave me the vaguest, most confusing explanation I could have imagined. She said she felt overwhelmed and needed some time to think. Think about what? I asked, feeling panic rise in my chest. Our future, she replied. Our future? We're 6 weeks away from getting married. What is there to figure out now? She just shrugged and avoided eye contact, saying, "I just think I need to clear my head. Europe will be a good opportunity for that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pushed for more details, but the more I asked, the more she clammed up. Eventually, we were both frustrated. I tried to stay calm, but everything in my gut was screaming that something was off. The next day, she packed her bags like everything was perfectly normal. There wasn't some dramatic goodbye. She just said she'd call me when she landed, then left. I stood there, watching her drive away, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with had just walked out, leaving me with a million unanswered questions. For the first few days after she left, I kept telling myself everything was fine. Maybe she really just needed a break to clear her head. Wedding planning is stressful, right? But as the days passed, her texts became less frequent. When she did reply, her messages were short, almost distant. The warmth I had always known in her was fading, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the growing dread in the pit of my stomach, but my friends and family started noticing something was off. I had no idea how to explain the situation to them. How do you tell people that your fiancé took off on a spontaneous trip and asked for a break just weeks before your wedding? Sounded crazy, even to me. 2 weeks into her trip, though, I started seeing some things on social media that made everything so much worse. It didn't sit right with me. Sarah wasn't posting much, but her friends sure were. One of them, Emily, tagged her in a photo at some club in Paris, and there she was, draped all over some guy I didn't recognize. They weren't just casually standing next to each other. They were way too close for comfort. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was probably just the angle, or maybe he was an old college friend I didn't know about. Surely, I was blowing this out of proportion, right? But then the photos kept coming. Night after night, different places, different cities, and it was always the same guy. It wasn't just Emily posting either. Other friends were sharing pictures and videos, and Sarah was always right there with him. Each time I saw her with that guy, my gut screamed louder that something was wrong. After seeing a video of them dancing together at a club in Barcelona, I couldn't take it anymore. I called her immediately, but she didn't pick up. She didn't even text me back until the next day, and when she did, her message was brief. She was tired and would catch up with me later. That was it. The doubts were starting to eat me alive. I needed answers. When she finally called me a few days later, I didn't waste any time. "Who's the guy?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What guy?" she replied, sounding genuinely confused. "The guy you've been hanging out with." The one in all the pictures, I shot back. There was a pause and then she sighed. Oh, him? He's just a friend. You're being paranoid. Paranoid. She always pulled that word out when she wanted to shut me down. But I wasn't letting it slide this time. Sarah, he's in every single photo. You're always with him and you two look way too comfortable, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed, but it was strained. You're overreacting. I told you I needed space. This trip was supposed to help me clear my head. And now you're making it all about some random guy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really turning this around on me? So what? You asked for a break, and now you're acting like we're not even together. We are together, she snapped, but there was an edge to her voice. I just needed time to figure things out. Can't you respect that? A few weeks after the email, I ran into Emily again. She seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact, but eventually, she confessed something that rocked me to my core. Sarah had been seeing someone while we were still together. That guy from the trip? He wasn't just some random college friend. He was someone Sarah had been talking to for months, maybe even before we got engaged. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Emily said she hadn't wanted to tell me earlier because Sarah made her promise to keep it a secret. She didn't want to be the one to break that promise, but seeing the pain I was in, she couldn't keep it from me any longer. My entire world crumbled in that moment. All those doubts, those gut feelings I had tried to ignore, were suddenly validated. Sarah had been lying to me for who knows how long, and here I was, hoping she'd come back and explain everything, while the truth was that she had already moved on. Emily had no clue Sarah would ghost me like that. She figured Sarah would eventually confess, but instead, she left me hanging, completely in the dark, while she moved on with someone else. I thanked Emily for telling me the truth, but inside, I felt like an idiot. I had spent weeks mourning a relationship that had ended long before Sarah even left for Europe. The truth hit me like a freight train. I'd been lied to, used, and tossed aside like I meant nothing. The hardest part of it all? Facing the fact that I had been blind the entire time. There had to have been signs, little red flags I missed, but I ignored them because I loved her. I trusted her. I had no reason to suspect she was cheating. But looking back, everything started clicking into place. Her distance, the moments where she was glued to her phone instead of being present with me. I told myself it was work or stress, but now I knew better. It was more than that. She had checked out and I had been too blind to see it. The betrayal was like a knife in my gut. I had been building a future with someone who wasn't even there anymore. I wasted years of my life loving someone who was already gone. And now I had to somehow figure out how to pick up the pieces. My friends kept telling me to get back out there, to start dating again. But how could I? I couldn't even trust myself, let alone someone else. I had been so blind to Sarah's lies that I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. I buried myself in work, hoping to drown out the pain. But no matter how busy I stayed, the memories crept back in. Every time I heard a song we used to love, or came across a picture of us on my phone, it was like she was still there, haunting me. A ghost I couldn't escape. And the worst part? I still missed her, even after everything. As the months crawled by, I slowly started putting my life back together. I focused on me for the first time in years. I took up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, and spent more time with my family. Little by little, I started to feel like myself again. But trust? That was shattered. How do you believe in someone else when the person you thought you'd spend your life with stabbed you in the back so effortlessly? Then, one day, out of the blue, I got a message on social media from Sarah. She had unblocked me. Her message was long, apologetic, and full of excuses. She said she was sorry for everything, claiming she'd been in a bad place mentally, overwhelmed by the pressure of the wedding. She finally admitted she had cheated but said it wasn't serious, like that was supposed to make it better. She wrote that she missed me and hoped we could talk, maybe even rebuild our friendship. I sat there, staring at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. A part of me wanted to unleash all the anger and pain I'd been carrying for months, to let her know just how much she had broken me. Another part of me wanted to ignore it, to erase her from my life completely. But in that moment, I realized that no apology could ever undo the damage she'd done. The pain Sarah had caused me was still there, simmering beneath the surface. A part of me wanted to delete her message and move on, leaving her in the past where she belonged. In the end, I chose not to respond. I had spent far too much time grieving over what I thought we had. Her apology, if you could even call it that, didn't change the fact that she had lied, cheated, and blocked me out when I needed her most. It was too little, too late. Took a long time, but eventually I found peace. I learned to forgive myself for being blindsided, for trusting someone who wasn't worthy of it. Instead of mourning a relationship that wasn't worth saving, I began to focus on my own happiness. Sarah had shown me who she truly was, and I finally accepted that I deserved better. The experience changed me, made me stronger in ways I hadn't anticipated. I came out of it with a clearer sense of who I was and what I wanted in a relationship. Trust, honesty, and communication. Real pillars to build a future on, not the fragile house of lies Sarah had constructed. After months of silence, just when I thought I had finally started to move on from Sarah and the chaos she brought into my life, she resurfaced. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. I was at work, sipping my second cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from my boss or maybe a friend checking in. It wasn't. It was Sarah. Seeing her name flash on my screen hit me like a wave of emotions I didn't want to feel. I hadn't heard from her in what felt like forever. After she blocked me, after all the lies and cheating, I had convinced myself she was gone for good. I had been working so hard to forget her, to move on from the way she had shattered my trust. And now, there she was, casually reappearing as if nothing had happened. I hesitated before opening the message. Part of me didn't want to. I knew that by opening that door, I could be pulled back into the mess I'd fought so hard to escape. But curiosity got the better of me and I clicked on it. Hey, can we talk? That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual message, like we'd last spoken a week ago, like everything was fine. I could feel the anger rising in me as I reread those 4 words over and over. After all the pain she had caused, she had the audacity to ask if we could talk, as if a simple conversation could undo the damage she had done. I didn't respond immediately. I left her message on read and tried to go about my day. But it was impossible. Her return was like a ghost haunting my thoughts, reminding me of everything I'd been through. I tried to brush it off, to bury it like I had done with all the memories of her. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to respond. Not for her, but for me. I needed closure. I couldn't let her waltz back into my life and pretend like none of it had happened. Ignoring her would have been easier, but I knew deep down that wasn't the way to truly move on. I needed to confront her, to put this chapter of my life to rest once and for all. Later that night, after hours of letting her message eat away at me, I finally gave in and texted her back. "What do you want, Sarah?" It wasn't polite, but after everything she had done, I wasn't about to play nice. She replied almost immediately, as if she'd been sitting there, just waiting for me to respond. "I think we should talk about everything. I'm back from Europe now, and I feel like we need to clear the air." I actually laughed. Clear the air? Like a simple conversation could undo the months of lies, betrayal, and manipulation. She had destroyed everything, and now she wanted to act like we could just talk it out? But as much as I hated it, I still had questions. Questions only she could answer. So I agreed. Fine, let's talk. When we finally got on the phone, I could tell from the start she was trying to downplay everything, acting like it wasn't a big deal. She talked about her disappearance and cheating as if they were minor issues, little bumps in the road we could somehow work through. "I was going through a lot," she explained, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "I needed space to figure out my life. But that didn't mean I stopped caring about you." She made it sound like her trip to Europe had been some kind of spiritual journey, like it had given her clarity. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly, as if those words could erase the damage. I snapped. "You blocked me, Sarah. For weeks. You disappeared without a single explanation, and you were with someone else. How can you sit there and say you didn't mean to hurt me?" She let out this exasperated sigh, as if I was the one being unreasonable. I wasn't ready to settle down yet. Panicked. Europe gave me the space I needed to think, and yeah, I made mistakes. But that doesn't mean we can't fix this. I couldn't believe the nerve of her. Did she seriously think we could just move on? Like she hadn't completely shattered my trust? Like the cheating, the blocking, the lies were just some phase? There's nothing to fix, I said coldly, cutting her off. You cheated. You blocked me. You made your choice, and now we're done. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, probably scrambling to come up with the right words to manipulate me again. I know I messed up, she finally whispered. But can't we at least try? I've been thinking about us a lot. And I miss you. I miss what we had. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After everything she'd put me through, the lies, the months of pain, the way she disappeared without a trace. She thought she could just say she missed me, and I'd take her back? As if all that suffering meant nothing? No, Sarah. I'm not going back to that. You made your choice, and I've moved on. You should too. Her tone shifted in an instant. The apologetic act dropped, and the real Sarah came out, defensive, angry. So that's it? You're just gonna throw away 5 years like it's nothing? You won't even try to talk this through? I felt my pulse spike as I gritted my teeth. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that the moment you lied to me and disappeared. I'm done. Sarah, I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want anything to do with you. I hung up before she could even respond. For the first time in months, I felt something close to closure. Maybe not the kind I thought I'd get, but at least I wasn't letting her string me along anymore. I finally stood my ground, finally said no to her manipulation. But after that, I knew I had to tell my friends and family what had really gone down. I kept most of them in the dark for too long, and they deserved to know the truth. So I did what any of us would do these days. I created a group chat. Felt surreal trying to put it all into words. How do you explain months of betrayal in a handful of messages? But I was blunt. I told them Sarah and I were done, that she had cheated on me, blocked me, and disappeared without a trace. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't dwell on the details either. I just needed them to know where I stood, and that I needed their support to move on. Their reactions were instant. My closest friends, like Mike and Lisa, couldn't believe it. Sarah, the girl who always seemed so perfect, had done that? My family, though, was hit even harder. My sister Emily, not to be confused with Sarah's friend, was livid. She'd always been protective of me, and when she found out Sarah had cheated and ghosted me, she was ready to explode. But then came the last thing I expected. Sarah found out about the group chat. I don't know how, but somehow word got back to her, and instead of taking responsibility for what she did, she decided to crash the chat, uninvited, and play the victim. She barged into the conversation, immediately twisting the story. She claimed I had distorted the truth, making her out to be the villain. She said she'd been struggling with her mental health, and that I hadn't given her the space she needed. She even tried to paint herself as the one who'd been hurt, saying I wasn't supportive enough. It was like she was rewriting everything, warping reality to fit her own twisted narrative. For a second, I was stunned. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to do this, here of all places. But then, something incredible happened. My friends and family didn't hold back. Sarah, you blocked him. Mike shot back immediately. You disappeared for weeks. How is that his fault? Lisa was next, not letting her off the hook for a second. We saw the photos, Sarah. You were with someone else the whole time. You can't sit here and pretend you're the victim. And then my sister Emily, who had been holding back her fury, finally let loose. After everything you've done, you seriously have the nerve to come here and act like you're the one who's been wronged? You disappeared, you lied, you cheated, and now you're just trying to save face. Take responsibility for what you did. The chat exploded. One by one, my friends and family called her out, and the more she tried to defend herself, the worse it got for her. She had no defense, no way to justify what she'd done. Every excuse she made, every attempt to shift the blame, fell apart under the weight of her own lies. And there, in front of everyone, Sarah was exposed. No more games, no more pretending. Everyone could see her for what she really was. Actions speak louder than words, and eventually, Sarah just stopped responding. The group chat fell silent, and while I was still reeling from the fact that she had the nerve to twist everything around, I was also overwhelmed by the support I received. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting this battle alone. My friends and family weren't just backing me up. They were calling her out for her lies, her manipulation, and everything she had tried to do. Sarah's hold on me was broken. In the weeks that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Sarah was out of my life for good, and I had finally gotten the closure I needed. Cutting ties with someone who had treated me like dirt wasn't easy, but it was like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. I could finally start focusing on myself. And I wasn't alone. My friends and family were with me every step of the way. Sure, there were moments when I'd think about what could have been, the life we'd planned, the future I thought we'd have. But those moments started to fade. Little by little, I threw myself into the things that mattered. My career, my hobbies, the people who actually cared about me. Slowly, the wounds started to heal. Sarah had tried to come back into my life, tried to pretend like everything could just go back to normal, but I wasn't that naive anymore. I wasn't the same person she had left behind. I was stronger. I'd learned that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who cut you the deepest. And I'd learned that it's okay to walk away, no matter how much time you've invested in them. Sarah's return didn't break me. It freed me. It gave me the final push I needed to close the door on that chapter of my life and start a new one, where I was in control of my happiness. And that, more than anything, was the closure I'd been searching for. But just when I thought it was all over, the past came knocking again. A week after Sarah's meltdown in the group chat, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, expecting some random telemarketer, but curiosity got the best of me. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Hi, it's Donna," came the voice on the other end. Sarah's mother. My heart sank instantly. We had always been on good terms, so I didn't hang up right away. Maybe she just wanted to check in. I thought maybe this was her way of offering support. But I was wrong. Again. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "I've been talking to Sarah, and she's really upset about everything that happened. I know she made mistakes, but she's genuinely sorry. She misses you, and I think, if you just talked, maybe you could work things out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced. Did she not know what Sarah had done to me? Or, even worse, did she know, and still expect me to just forgive her? "Donna," I said, trying to stay calm even though anger was surging inside me. "I appreciate the call, but Sarah cheated on me, lied to me, and then disappeared without a word for weeks. She blocked me and left me in the dark while she was off with someone else. And now, she thinks we can just talk and make it better." Donna hesitated. "I know, but she's been struggling with her mental health. She wasn't thinking clearly." I cut her off, my voice shaking. "That doesn't excuse what she did. She had every opportunity to come clean, to be honest, but she chose to lie, cheat, and ghost me instead. I've moved on, and she needs to do the same." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Sarah and I are done, Donna. There's no fixing this," I said, trying to keep my tone polite, even though my patience was wearing thin. "She's been going through a tough time," Donna pressed. "Europe was a mistake, and she realizes that now. She's even seeing a therapist to work on herself. She's really trying, and I think you should give her a second chance." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my frustration. "Donna, I understand that you love your daughter and want to help her, but she blocked me, disappeared, and cheated. I can't trust her anymore. I'm sorry, but there's no going back." There was a long pause on the other end. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd finally let it go. But then Donna hit me with the one line I was so tired of hearing. "But what about the 5 years you spent together? Don't just throw that away." 5 years. It seemed like everyone, Sarah, her mother, even some of our mutual friends, kept bringing up that number, as if it were some magical argument that could erase all the betrayal, the pain, and the lies. "I'm not throwing anything away, Donna," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sarah already made her choice. I'm just trying to move on." Donna sighed, clearly disappointed, but at last, she relented. "All right, I understand. I just thought I'd reach out." I hope you'll think about it. I assured her I would, though I knew there was no changing my mind. After that, the call ended. But that wasn't the last time I heard from Donna or from Sarah's friends. Over the next few weeks, I got several more calls and texts, mostly from people on Sarah's side trying to convince me to reconsider. It felt like they were all reading from the same script. Sarah's sorry. She's working on herself. You should give her another chance. At first, I stayed polite, but eventually I hit my limit. It wasn't just Donna. Sarah's closest friend, Becca, started reaching out too. I'd never been particularly close with Becca, and I'd always sensed she wasn't a big fan of mine. Now, all of a sudden, she was acting like she was on a mission to get us back together. Look, I know Sarah screwed up, but she's been crying every day since you broke things off, Becca said in one of her texts. She's really trying, and I think you owe it to her to at least talk. Owe it to her? That phrase hit me like a punch in the gut. I didn't know Sarah anything. She had broken my trust, walked out on our relationship, and disappeared without a word. And now, somehow, I was being painted as the bad guy because I refused to let her back in? Felt surreal. The more pressure I got from her friends and family, the more resolute I became. I was done with Sarah. No amount of guilt-tripping was going to change that. I started ignoring most of the calls and texts. The constant pushing only made me more determined to stand my ground. Just when I thought things might finally die down, it got worse. Way worse. Sarah wasn't just texting anymore. She was showing up, relentlessly. After I shut the door in her face that first time, I thought she'd get the message. I thought she'd finally leave me alone. But I was wrong. The texts kept coming. Long, frantic messages about how she was sorry, how she couldn't live without me. When I ignored those, she upped the ante. She started showing up at my place. At first, it was once, then it became more frequent. Early in the morning, late at night, she didn't care. She'd stand outside my door, knocking and begging to talk. It was like she couldn't comprehend that I didn't want anything to do with her. The first time she showed up, I was about to head out for a run. I heard a knock, peeked through the peephole, and there she was, standing there like nothing had happened. My stomach churned. I hadn't seen her in months, but seeing her standing there brought back a tidal wave of emotions I had fought so hard to bury. I opened the door, trying to keep my cool. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" "I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice soft and pleading. "I miss you." Couldn't believe it. Miss me? After everything she had done. She expected me to just open the door and let her back into my life? "We've already talked." "There's nothing left to say," I replied coldly. "Please, just hear me out," she begged, stepping closer, her eyes wide with desperation. "I love you." "No, Sarah," I said, stepping back and gripping the door. "We're done. You need to leave." She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but I didn't care. She had put me through hell, months of lies, betrayal, and manipulation. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into opening that door again. So I did the only thing I could do. I closed the door in her face. I thought that would be it. Surely, after being shut down like that, she'd move on. But I was wrong again. It wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Sarah started showing up even more often. I'd hear knocks on the door in the middle of the night, sometimes as late as 2 a.m. She wouldn't leave. She'd just stand there, knocking and begging, her voice muffled through the door, pleading for me to let her in. She'd say things like, "I just want to talk," or "Please, I miss you." It was like she was completely detached from reality, unable to accept that it was over. I began to feel like I was being stalked in my own home. Every knock made my skin crawl. I couldn't relax, couldn't feel safe in my own space. I'd sit there, lights off, hoping she'd give up, but she'd linger outside, sometimes for hours. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It wasn't just unsettling, it was terrifying. And I knew I had to do something before it escalated even further. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped by Sarah's relentless obsession. Then things took an even darker turn. One evening, I was out with friends when I got a call from my mom. At first, I didn't think much of it. But when I answered, her voice was full of concern. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, sounding serious. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" I replied, confused. Well, Sarah called me earlier, she said, her tone sharpening. She was asking about you, wondering why you won't talk to her. She sounded off. I'm worried. My stomach dropped. Sarah was contacting my mom now? She was crossing every boundary imaginable. I had tried to keep most of the details of our breakup away from my family, but now she was dragging them into her obsession. I'm fine, Mom, I reassured her, even though my heart was pounding. But Sarah's been showing up at my place, and now she's calling you. This is getting out of hand. You need to do something, my mom said, her voice filled with concern. She doesn't sound like she's in a good place. I knew she was right. Sarah's behavior was escalating, and I was starting to feel unsafe. It wasn't just her showing up at my place anymore. It was her invading every part of my life. I felt trapped, like no matter what I did, I couldn't escape her. The final straw came when she showed up at my workplace. I worked in an office downtown, and we had security at the front desk, so I never expected her to show up there. But one afternoon, as I was returning from lunch, I saw her sitting in the lobby, waiting for me. My heart sank. I couldn't believe she had gone this far. Without a second thought, I turned around and walked right back outside, not even acknowledging her presence. My hands were shaking as I called security and told them to make sure she was escorted out. I knew in that moment that this had to stop. Sarah wasn't just crossing boundaries. She was destroying them. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, never feeling safe. That's when I called a lawyer. I explained everything, the endless texts, the uninvited visits to my home, her harassing my family, and now showing up at my workplace. The lawyer didn't hesitate. He advised me to file for a restraining order. It wasn't an easy decision to make. I never imagined I'd have to file a restraining order against someone I once loved, someone I had planned to marry. But Sarah had crossed far too many lines. She had become obsessive, and I couldn't live like this anymore. The process was difficult, but I knew it was the only way to get my life back. When the restraining order was granted, it felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Sarah was served, and the visits, the texts, the calls, they all stopped. Just like that, it was over. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. In the weeks that followed, I slowly began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when I thought about Sarah, about what we had before everything went so wrong. But those moments became fewer and farther between as I focused on moving forward. Sarah had been a huge part of my life for 5 years, and letting go of that was hard. But I realized that the person I had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. For my own sanity, I had to accept that. The restraining order was the final chapter in a story that had gone on far too long. It wasn't the ending I had expected, but it was the one I needed. And now, for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe.